Hi, everyone. Welcome to Restitch America. My name is Alma Ohene-Opare, and I'm very excited to be with you today. And thank you for joining us today. And before we begin the show, I wanted to remind you all to go to my platform to join our community, willfulpositivity.com. So willfulpositivity.com is a community where you, once you join, will receive daily devotionals from me. And not only that, but you'll also get an exclusive article from me every single day. And this is something that I have loved doing. It keeps me engaged and gives me something to do consistently. And it gives me an opportunity to get to know all of you people who support this platform. So thank you so much for those of you who are already following us. And for those who are not, and this is your first time hearing me, go to willfulpositivity.com to subscribe for free. Like, subscribe, follow, do everything, and help us grow this platform. At the end of the day, it's all about getting the word out. And the farther and wider we can get the word about the things that we believe out, I think we can build a platform that is sustainable, and we can build a country that is defensible. So thank you so much for your help. Now let's get to the show today. All right, so today I have with you a friend of mine that I met, and I met her a few weeks ago. And some of you who follow me on social media know that I was selected as one of the people as a special guest to attend the Student Action Summit for Turning Point USA in Florida a couple of months ago. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of great conservative creators. And today's guest is one of those people that I met there. And considering what has happened over the past few weeks, we now share this tragic bond because we were both at that final event that Charlie Kirk held before his tragic passing and his assassination. And so this is going to be probably a little bit more vulnerable as an episode because of this tragedy that has happened, that has bound us together. And I hope that we can get through this conversation and take a little bit of time to feel the emotion of the event, or of the events of the past few weeks. And so let's jump in. Our guest today is Erin, and Erin goes by Logic and Liberty, and I'm going to have her introduce herself. And so let's jump right in.
Hi,
Erin,
thank
tell
you
us
so
a
much
little
for
bit
having me.
about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, first of all. It's honestly a pleasure to be here and see you again under different circumstances. But my name is Erin. I am on social media, Logic and Liberty, and my main goal, and the reason I got involved in politics in the first place, was under the COVID mandates. And that's what I think when a lot of people woke up, and it really just showed me that we have to be paying attention and we have to be plugged in. And so I organized a grassroots movement to get people out and protesting the mandates that we were seeing from the Biden administration, and also did a nationwide school walkout against the mask mandates in our schools, which we now know were utterly pointless and unnecessary. Kind of burnt out. And since then, I've been really just trying to provide information and create political content that adds value, whether it's through educating and informing, or telling people how they can get involved and get out there and fight for what they believe in, and hosting live political debates to have the conversation and do it hopefully in a civil way. And I think that's a really great way for people to learn. And it's something that, as you had mentioned, Charlie Kirk firmly believed in, and I still do. I think we have to have an open marketplace of dialogue and exchange ideas and have people listen to those and decide for themselves and present your strongest argument for your views. And maybe someone will even change your mind with theirs. So I really love the idea of harnessing conversation online, again, giving people information. And I recently launched a podcast that I'm excited about too, and we can talk about that later. But my whole goal is to fight for liberty, and I'm a strong conservative, but I also believe that even someone on the other side of the aisle, I can learn something from. And I think that's really valuable, and it's important for us all to remember that.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So you are in Colorado, right? And I've been watching a lot of your content recently, and I see that you recently posted a video talking about the fact that it appears as though a lot of people have written off Colorado, right? They look at it and say, you know, the left has captured Colorado at the moment, and there's no point in investing extra time and energy into that. So talk a little bit about your feelings about how Colorado has changed over time and what your desires are for what needs to be done there.
Yeah, it's been really disheartening. We have gone just radical blue, and there's no denying it based on all the stories you can see about Colorado that come out. I feel like almost weekly at this point. Our schools are radical blue. We have a lot of controversies there. And we're one of the only states that didn't go farther Trump in the 2024, or the only, I think. We were the last, essentially, as far as inching towards Trump, and went stronger Harris. So it's been disappointing. A lot of Coloradans feel disenfranchised because we feel like we had a huge influx of people move into Colorado and change our state. There was a very coordinated effort by the Democrats, and it's in a book called The Blueprint, to take over our state. And I highly recommend, if people are interested in ensuring this doesn't happen in their state, they go check that out. Because if anyone thinks that they are immune from this happening to them, they're crazy. You have to be involved. And I think we had a high level of apathy. I don't know if Coloradans, even still to this day, a lot of them understand how radical it's gotten, how many constitutional rights have been infringed upon by legislation that's been passed. So one of my main goals is trying to just inform Coloradans first. Give them the information like, listen, this is not common sense. This is not sensible. We've gone too far, and it's to our detriment. Everything is way too unaffordable. We have crazy policies coming out of the schools where they want to infringe upon parental rights blatantly and boldly. And so what I would love to see in Colorado is all of us wake up, and I'm not saying we're going to go red. I'm not. But if we could go purple and have some balance, that's really the most I could hope for right now. And the other goal is, if I can achieve this and help, this year in local elections and next year in the midterms, maybe I can help other people in radical blue states that feel the same, that feel helpless and don't know what to do. And, if we can kind of guide them, or I can give them information, inspire them even, then that's all I could wish for, to be honest, is to have at least a little bit of impact, not only in Colorado, but maybe even reach some people in these other states that feel disenfranchised.
Thank you for sharing that. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss today was exactly what you're talking about, which is the fact that there is a certain level of apathy, especially on the right. Now, it appears over the last few months that conservatism has been on the upswing, and this is something that Charlie was tapping into. The fact that the younger generation today are now more conservative than their parents, and that is an anomaly that did not happen by chance. It was the fact that one side of the aisle was completely detaching from reality to the point where they were catering to all the extremes on their side in the name of inclusion. And that opened an opportunity for common sense to become, the radical idea. So the funny thing is that the children and the youth are now rebelling against their parents. And today's rebellion is common sense, which is kind of ironic. However, in the midst of this upswing, in the midst of, the Republicans' newfound, success on social media, using memes, tapping into the culture, there is a sense of complacency that I feel is beginning to build up. And the reason I say that is I have seen multiple videos of people saying the Democrats will never win another election. And that started to bother me a little bit, because as soon as that kind of messaging gets a hold, people immediately begin to withdraw from the political square and start to expect that we will win by default. And I think that is a very dangerous position to be in. And the reason why conservatives are most susceptible to this idea is the fact that most of us just want to live our lives, right? Activism is not our day-to-day bread and butter. We want to live our lives. We want to build community. We want to raise our kids. We want to educate our kids. We love our sports and we love our outdoor activities and so on. And so we jump into politics to accomplish a certain goal, and then we withdraw and go back and say, let's just go live our lives. And that is usually a good thing. Unfortunately, we're in a climate where the people who oppose us are not sleeping, right? Just like you said, they have a blueprint, they have a strategy, and that strategy is ongoing. And the way I look at it is like the difference between a seed and a weed, right? With a seed that you care about, you have to do so much work to nurture it, to make sure it has fertilizer, to make sure it has the right sunlight, and so on. Have you ever wondered how weeds survive without any kind of care whatsoever, right? They just grow and they bear fruit. And you're like, how is it possible that this weed is coming out of this concrete slab with no help whatsoever? But when I plant a flower, I have to do so much to keep it alive, right? And one of the stories that I shared in a recent article was the fact that I grew up under a military dictatorship. And I remember after 20 years of being under this one president, it started as a military dictatorship, but he eventually switched over and had elections. But of course, elections, it's kind of like Venezuela, right? You have elections, but the winner is predetermined. And so I only knew one president until I was 16. From the time I was born till the time I was 16, I only knew one president. And I remember vividly the day that the voting happened. And the reason why I remember it so vividly is because polling stations, schools were transformed into polling stations. And at the time, my parents had a private school that was in our house. So our house became a polling station. So I was there when people came to vote, and I saw the transition. And I remember when that power was taken away from the government of the dictatorship. And finally, we thought we were completely done with that party. And we believed that they would never come back into power. And it only took 8 years before people forgot everything, before people, relaxed, and that party was back in power. Today, in my home country, that same party is still in power today. And so this idea that, we've won a victory, and because of that, that winning is going to continue is very naive. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. And I think your story is so inspirational, but so impactful to, someone being from America my whole life, right? Just going back generations. We're spoiled. We're spoiled. We have this beautiful thing called the Constitution that gives us quite a bit of buffer where we can sit back and have our rights for the most part preserved. However, it's not infallible, and it was never meant to stand on alone. With liberty comes responsibility. And I need people to hear that. It has to be constantly defended and stood for. And whether that's local, state, or federal, all of these matter. I think some people get very distracted by the federal level. And until you're in a state that goes radically blue as a conservative, you don't see it happen in front of your eyes, and you don't see it impact you to the level that some of us have been impacted. So it 100% has to be fought for. And it's interesting you brought up the seeds and the plants. So I had recently on a podcast episode talked about the Lorax. Have you ever read the Lorax by Dr. Seuss?
I've seen the movie.
Okay. So in the last line, it goes something like this. I won't know the exact words, but it just says, unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing will change. It won't. And that impacted me because I see the Constitution. I see the founding fathers gave us this truffula seed, and that's a Constitution. However, in order to preserve it and, preserve liberty, we have to plant it, and we have to water it, and we have to tend to it. And like you said, I think a lot of conservatives, they'll show up and show out in big election years, and then they retreat. or they completely neglect their state and local level races. And you have to understand that those are just as important, if not more important, because we have seen the Democrats get into every institution in this country. They had a long game, and it was decades, and they executed it beautifully. And we allowed it to happen. And now it's going to take a lot more work to get all of these institutions cleared out of this radical progressive ideology. And that's on us. That takes us. That takes someone running for school board. That takes us door knocking for a school board candidate. That takes you supporting a city council member, showing up to these meetings and making sure they know they're being watched so you can hold them accountable. And that's exactly what our founding fathers wanted and understood. They knew that it would be necessary, and it's our civic responsibility to do so. And I think we just, as Americans, and especially as conservatives on the right, we have to shift our mindset and we have to prioritize it. Because like you said, we don't. There's a high level of apathy and a high level of like, oh, well, I voted, I'm good. No. It takes a lot more than that. And you know, each one of us, I hope, with what happened in the wake of Charlie Kirk, we need to pick up that baton, and it's our turn, and we need to carry that on.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that throughout this period, there are a lot of what I call political conversions. Like a lot of people are waking up, and a lot of people are recognizing that this, party or this ideology that I used to hold on to is no longer working in the real world. And a lot of people are discovering that they're either centrist. I've even seen a campaign all over social media of people saying, I just realized I'm conservative, right? And one of the things that I think is most important is how those people are received in the movement. And the way I think about it is, and the reason I started this podcast and called it Restitch America is because I believe that there is common ground to be had. However, that common ground needs to be built on a foundation of truth. And so it is not a wishy-washy common ground where we say, well, I'm going to accept that there are, 52 genders just so I can have common ground with you, right? It has to be rooted in truth. So even though I say we need to restitch America, it is not a permissiveness for things that are not true. We have to build on truth. And a lot of these people are coming into the movement without all the necessary foundational principles. And I feel it is our responsibility with platforms like these and your platform to begin to help these people build their understanding of conservatism, build their understanding of the Constitution, because a lot of people have been told for many, many, many years that the Constitution was created by old white men who were racist and just wanted to control people, and we need to abolish the Constitution. That is the prevailing narrative. And we need to begin to speak in ways that is attractive to people who would not normally listen to people like us. And at the same time, we need to help these people who are coming into the movement, who are coming into, I would say, the America First movement, the Constitution First movement, to help those people build their foundations so that you don't end up in a place where people begin to revert back to what feels comfortable. And I want to show you something. A long time ago, I listened to a speech by a man that I really admire, and he had all of us do something. So, Erin, I'm going to ask you to do this with me, and we'll show the audience what I mean by this. So, take your hands like this, and just interlock your hands like you normally do. How does that feel?
Strong.
Feels strong? Does it feel comfortable?
Yeah, it's pretty comfortable.
Pretty comfortable. All right. Now do me one favor and move your fingers one step to the left and interlock it. How does that feel?
Less comfortable.
What do you want to do right now?
Switch back.
Right?
Yeah.
You want to switch back. So that is exactly the state that a lot of people are in if we don't help them feel comfortable in this new world that they find themselves in. It is a natural instinct to want to go back to what feels comfortable. And it's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of sacrifice, a lot of help along the way to begin to feel comfortable in this new skin, right? In this new paradigm, in this new way of thinking. And we need to be there to support these people who are coming into the movement. What do you think?
That's a solid point. Surprisingly, with my state, and I know I talk about my state a lot, but again, it's a great example. It's almost like a cautionary tale for all the conservatives in this country. We have seen an increase in Republican registrations in Gen Z, in Colorado even. So you hit the nail on the head as far as this younger generation, but also a lot of people who saw the visceral reaction after Charlie Kirk from the left. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I've heard so many testimonies, as I'm sure you have, prior leftists who were like, oh my gosh, I felt brainwashed. I didn't see all of this. And it's going to take your voice, my voice, so many conservative voices, like you said, speaking truth and educating and informing about like, no, let's talk about the real founding of this country and the real spirit of America and the Constitution and why it is so important and why it is the most powerful written government document in human history, period. So, welcome in. And also I'd love to see us change the tone of the conservative party and the conservative movement. And that is ground game. That is being bold and brave in your beliefs and being outspoken. No more, I don't want to hear silent majority 10 years from now. I don't want to hear it because it's what got us here. And it's what got our schools a mess. It's what got our federal agencies a mess. We can't be the silent majority anymore. I want us to be loud and proud, peacefully, lawfully, and principled. And that I think will inspire people. And what I've always loved about the right, and we see it now, is we don't do the purity tests, and we can't engage in the purity test that the left does. I want us to be a very wide umbrella of varying beliefs, like you said, rooted in truth, but we may have different ideas on the best solutions. And that's going to be the most fruitful thing for this country and for the conservative movement, is to be welcoming. Like, you may have someone who is goth alternative, like, hey, I'm a new conservative, I want to hear about it. Welcome them in. Let's not be like these old dudes at the golf club, conservative Republican Party. That's gone. It's a whole new movement, and that came with Trump, and I think it's continuing. And obviously Gen Z is hungry for it. So like you said, it's on us to create and contribute to the movement in the best way possible.
And one thing that I have also noticed is, talking about purity tests, there seems to be this unwarranted divisions that I see creeping up every now and then, where there are these factions that are being created. And I think a lot of that has been exposed with especially talking about what is happening around the world with Israel and the Gaza war, with Ukraine and the policies there and other international events. And that has seemed to fracture a little bit the conservative movement, with people picking one side over the other and creating these, I would say, unnecessary divisions. So recently I posted an article where I talked about finding unity and not amplifying the things that divide us. Yes, we will have things that we don't agree 100% on, but we need to amplify the things that we unite on. And so this is my personal approach, and people might do it a little differently, but my personal approach is, I am not going to dedicate a lot of time and energy to the divisions in the conservative movement. Now, I see some people who do this where they're like, because they want to portray this idea of, hey, I'm a person of integrity, and so, I call balls and strikes no matter where they come from. And I get that sentiment, but just like a family, you don't go out into the world and tell everybody, wash your dirty linens in public. I feel like we need to, let's say, and I'm not saying protect a bad behavior. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is, yes, you call out the bad behavior in private, but we amplify the things that are good about our party and our movement and our ideology in public. Because when we begin to take the airways and leverage it to amplify the divisions, then these new people who are coming into our movement looks at that and says, is basically moving from one set of, divisions to another set of divisions. And one of the things that, for me personally, is bothering me the most is the fact that a lot of people are saying, I am independent. And I get that sentiment, but what that means is that people are saying, I can't see myself aligning with this side or the other side, which inherently says both sides are equally bad, which I don't think that's true. And so if that is not true, then what are we doing that makes people feel like, hey, I don't want to be here, but at the same time, I can't join you either. And I think I know people like to do that and say, I'm just independent, but that assumes that there's no right side of the story. There's no right side of the coin. And we are saying there's the right side of the coin. There is an adherence to our rights, holding on to truth, understanding the Constitution, understanding that, yes, our country was flawed, our country is still flawed, and yet we have created the most prosperous economic system that exists in the world. And you can't be independent of that truth. You either understand and embrace that truth or you don't. And you can't just stand in the middle and say, I am just independent of all these things, right? And so what are we doing as conservatives that are making it difficult for people to say, I don't want to be on the left because I now understand that, they are in many ways allergic to certain truths, but I can't see myself joining this movement because we are doing something that does not make us a palatable alternative.
Yeah, I think it's a multifaceted issue. And I do think there's a way for conservatives to disagree on issues like Gaza and Israel and do it tactfully, do it in a way where we're having the conversation. We're trying in good faith, right? Not to convince the other person, but to present my point, present my information, and want to learn from the other side. Have a fruitful conversation about it. I think there's so much value in that. But let's do it without personal attacks. Let's not rip each other apart in the process. It's not beneficial. Like you said, it doesn't build a feeling of community and positivity on our side. But having open disagreements like that, I think, can be really productive and even encouraging, right? And welcoming. But you have to do it the right way. And I think sometimes we can fall into the purity test. There are portions of the conservative movement, let's not lie to ourselves, that are like, if you're not full-blown MAGA, you hear it with the rhino stuff. And I will say, calling out truth of these politicians who are failing us and are not aligning with conservative values, that's truth. That's that aspect of truth you spoke on. That's not defamation. That's not slanderous. That's just truth. Listen, you voted against our Constitution or against liberty here. I'm going to call you out. But calling someone a rhino simply because maybe they believe in maintaining certain social programs in a way that, preserves capitalism, free market ideals, that's not a rhino. That's just a disagreement on a solution for society, right? I think there's ways to do that. And sometimes we do fall victim to the purity tests, which are very they're not productive. Another thing, what was the other thing you mentioned at the end there? I lost my train of thought.
Just, I was talking about making it so that people who are leaving the left we don't create obstacles for them to identify themselves with us.
I think part of it, the left has done an incredible job of labeling us as fascists, bigots, Nazis. The level of cancellation we've seen of people on the right, the just lambasting and visceral. I do think there's some people who are scared to identify as a Republican or on the right. And I myself was more like right leaning, I would call myself, several years ago, even a year ago, maybe. I'm much more staunch in my beliefs. And there's a lot that's a whole different conversation. But I think giving them a level of community, like you said, a place to land, and knowing that they'll be supported and welcomed, and they'll be given information and resources and voices that they can resonate with, just building that type of community. And, we saw in the wake of a very large tragedy on our side, it was vigils and memorials. It was not rioting. It was not burning vehicles or cities down. And standing in that truth of like, if we're this horrible of a side, don't you think we would have reacted quite differently? So breaking down those false narratives that they have been just fed for so long now and so effectively, right? Through legacy media, through Hollywood, all of these things, and showing, look, we're real people. We're real people. We're genuine. We simply want our liberties. We believe in personal
Are you
responsibility.
telling me that we're not motivated by hate, as
Oh,
they say?
I mean, imagine that. We're not all inherently racist or bigoted. We just simply believe in personal responsibility and liberty, and that has been painted in a certain way. But like you said, it's truth. It's truth, and it's really making sure we communicate the pillars of conservatism, the Constitution, liberty first, because that always has to reign supreme. And the fact that if I talk about my username, Logic and Liberty, people are like, "Oh, you're a MAGA." I'm like, do you see how flawed that is, that the left will take a word like logic and a word like liberty and paint it as something ugly? That should be a red flag to everyone, but that's what they've done.
And for me, one of the things that I know people see Trump as divisive, but of all the things that Trump could have chosen to be his legacy and his slogan, it was a unifying call to make America great again. And somehow that was taken and was completely adulterated and made into a slur against half the country. And the fact that people have a visceral reaction to people wearing a hat that says, "Make America Great Again," and they cannot see that that is a unifying and rallying cry to all of America for us to build a more perfect union. That tells us how far we've come, right? We've come so far in terms of our divisions that even saying things like logic and liberty and saying things like common sense and saying things like, truth and reality and pragmatism is now all seen as right wing, which is, it's crazy.
I can't help but laugh. I genuinely can't help but laugh, because when you're on the other side of it and you're looking at it just from an outsider's view, because I'm not like entrenched in the left, right? Thank goodness. It's just like, how can you guys, how did this happen? And we know how it happened, and we need to continue to talk about it. One thing that really actually applies here very well. I was on a TikTok live having a conversation with someone from the UK, and we were talking about immigration. And I told him my stance on immigration, that I believe in legal immigration. America's a melting pot. It is important. It's valuable. We cannot have a legal immigration that bogs our systems down, that bogs our resources down, and takes from US citizens, veterans, disabled individuals who are US citizens, right? We can't. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy for our society. We have to do legal immigration. We have a front door. We can't have people jumping line in front of the legal immigrants doing it the right way, period. And what he said at the end of this is, he said, this has been really interesting, because the way that the UK media presents us is that Republicans and conservatives want no immigration. They don't believe in immigration. And I'm like, he's like, you've presented a much more nuanced stance and view on this, and it actually makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly what we have to be presenting and talking about and having the conversations, because this individual thought that we hated immigrants. And I'm like, that is so far from the truth. Maybe I hear some radical people on the right say it, and I don't associate with them, and I don't want to associate with them. But by and large, the conservative movement absolutely believes in immigration. You're an immigrant. You're a conservative. I have a feeling if you thought we hated immigrants, you probably wouldn't be alongside us. So what are your thoughts on that?
But just to let you know the truth about my background, before I came to America, I had the same perspective, that Republicans did not want immigrants like me here. And the Democrats were the ones who wanted immigrants. So I was watching, I was only 16 years old, but I was watching the election between George Bush and Al Gore in 2000. And I remember reading a newspaper from America talking about the race. And I thought I wanted Al Gore to win, because I had a dream to come to America. And I thought, if Bush wins and he implements his anti-immigration stands, would I ever get a chance to come to America? And so I was, in Ghana, but rooting for Al Gore, not really understanding everything around ideology or, the underlying, principles of each party. I just knew that I wanted to come to the land of the free, where I felt my opportunities, I would have the best opportunity to fulfill my potential. And immediately the narrative was that it was the Democrats who would care for me. Now, of course, Al Gore did not win. Bush won, and I still got a visa to come to America in 2003. And my journey is a testament to America welcoming legal immigrants and giving them opportunity. But one of the most important parts of that process is assimilation. It's the welcoming people who are going to add to the richness of our tradition, who are going to recognize the value of our Constitution, people who are going to accept our norms and modify their lives to align with those norms. Now, of course, we have backgrounds, we have traditions, we have histories that can enrich the American fabric. And we bring those ideals with us as well. But one thing that we cannot forget, and this is exactly what you were talking about with Colorado, right? People moved in to Colorado and they completely changed what used to be. When I came to America in 2003, Colorado was pretty, leaning red.
Yeah.
And in 20 years, we've seen this transformation, right? The same way America is now importing people who, as soon as they land on this soil, begin to campaign for the destruction of this country. And it does not make sense. So I know you talked about Republicans or conservatives caring about legal immigration. I go even further. I say I care about legal immigration, even as an immigrant, but I care about legal immigration that is geared towards making America stronger. And so I recently proposed that we need to have ideological analysis of people who are coming here. Right now, they do an analysis of your social media. I don't know how deep they go, but when you apply for a visa, you have to give them your social media handles. So that's something they're doing. And then in the visa application, I don't know if a lot of Americans know this, but in the visa application, they ask you whether you support communism. And you have to say no. Now, of course, I don't support communism, so I've always said no. I don't know if people actually ever say yes to that question, but I think that should be expanded. I think if you are intending to come to America and you are intending to come here to come and say how, bad America is and how America needs to be destroyed, we should not let you legally even into the country, right? We have enough problems than to import people who are going to come and sow discord in our country. So my proposal is that we add other questions to the communism question, and we ask about the Bill of Rights, and we ask about whether people are willing to support the Bill of Rights, whether they're willing to support the Constitution of the United States before we're giving them a visa. Maybe you make it a little lax for people who are just visitors, but for people who are coming here to study, for people who are coming here to be either permanent residents, like, you have to make sure that their ideologies align with American ideals. Otherwise, we are shooting ourselves in the foot, even in the legal immigration realm.
Yeah, and this is a hot topic right now, right? Because we see the pro-Pali visas, student visas getting revoked. And I do think in a way we have that safeguard, right? Where, and some people would say maybe we need to reform this. That's again another debate that could go on for quite a while, is the Secretary of State can revoke those visas for any reason. They have very wide authority. And a visa, you're here as a privilege. You are a visitor. This is not you getting full-blown First Amendment rights like a US citizen. You have to understand that. And if you are here wanting to improve our system and improve, maybe seeking legislative reform that would improve our country, I'm all ears. But if you're here saying globalize the intifada, or advocating for radical Islam or terrorist organizations, I'm sorry, but that can be damaging. I want free speech. And so there's a really fine line here, right? We are a nation of free speech. We want even the bad ideas out there so we can combat them with good ideas. That's the best way, in my opinion, to combat them. However, we cannot have students scared to go to class. We can't have them being intimidated on campus. We can't have property damage. And that goes either way. That would be if people who are pro-Israel doing the same thing. I would have the same stance. So I do think there could be something to be looked at, especially with where we are. And I'm hoping it's just this phase of the Gaza-Israel conflict and this will calm down. Maybe I'm an optimist that way. But if you do not believe in the Constitution, if you do not believe in capitalism, why are you here? Why are you here? Why would you even want to be here? That makes zero sense, because we are not going to allow you to change, again, the most well-written governing document in the history of mankind. And also, like you said, a system that has created the most prosperity worldwide in human history. We're not letting you do that. So there's a line there. But I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and we need to be proud of that, right? We cannot be ashamed of our values, and we cannot accept this idea somehow that there's moral equivalency with all cultures and with all value systems. And we need to be able to, unapologetically say our system is better, and we want to preserve that system, and we don't want to weaken it with dangerous ideas. And this is what I say to people who say, well, what about freedom of speech? And I say, I am not infringing on your freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want to say. You don't have to say it here. We have, TikTok, we have social media. You can go back to some other country and say those same things. We're not stopping you from speaking. We're just saying you can't say them here. Go somewhere else. Go back to your country of origin and go say those things. You can still rail against America, but do it from some other place. We're not going to allow you to come into our country and, go into our institutions that are subsidized by the federal government and American taxpayers, and then leverage the microphones that we have in those places to try to tear us down, right? And so when we talk about the First Amendment, and a lot of people on the left would say, oh, aren't you for, free speech? Why are you, Mahmoud Khalil, why are you not allowing him, taking away his free speech rights? I'm like, nope, nobody took away his free speech rights. We're just saying you can't do it here. So he can still speak, but you don't have a right to be here, and you don't have a right to our microphones. You don't have a right to our campuses, to our young, adults, to poison their minds with ideologies that will end up destroying us if we let it. So yeah, you can have your rights, but you don't have to exercise them here.
I think it's important to highlight the privilege level of it. If they're getting grants from these universities, like you said, they're subsidized by the federal government, and they're sitting here hating on America, I don't understand it. It makes zero sense, because you have quite a privilege to be going to some of the best universities in the entire world. And you were allowed in to do so. I do think there's, like you said, the truth, right? And I think there's a way to combat a lot of this online craziness. And we see Gen Z is rejecting it as a whole. The individuals who are here in the United States are going Republican, right? They're not buying into the crazy radicals who somehow get in here and get a visa. But we need to highlight that these are privileges, and we're happy to have you here, but you cannot be using speech that turns into action against individuals, intimidation, threats, violence, rioting, property damage. That there's a line there. There just is. And I do think, as conservatives, and this is why Charlie Kirk was so effective, was having those conversations on college campuses. We need to go to the source and continue that. And we've seen a couple other people pop up who are carrying that torch and having the conversations. And I think combating these individuals with truth about, like, what are you even talking about? Like, that the US, like, you want to take our system and go to what that's better?
Exactly.
Show me another system that's doing better. I'm all ears. You're not going to. So, like, what are we doing here besides trying to just stir up unrest unproductively and just kind of, shout them down and be armored with the truth and with your constitutional knowledge and your values that you fully believe everyone should be treated equal. Why are you telling us that this is so wrong and painting it in such an ugly light?
Exactly. All right. This has been quite a conversation that has stemmed from one end of the spectrum, talking about, the apathy we're seeing in conservative circles, all the way back to our defense of what we know to be true, our defense of our way of life, our defense of our systems. And I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you so much for coming and joining us to have this conversation. But we're going to have one final question for our guest today. So here's the question. Where do you think America is headed post Donald Trump? Where do you think America is headed post Donald Trump? Are we going to lose the movement? Are we going to fracture? Do we have somebody else who can take up that torch and continue the trajectory we're on?
It's difficult to answer because it's in the hands of all of us in the conservative movement. We are at a turning point. And again, there's so much symbology with what happened with Charlie Kirk, but we are at a turning point, and we can either choose to really stand up and fight for liberty and fight for the conservative movement and get truth out there and do what we can as an individual, which can be extraordinarily impactful, even as one person. Or we can sit back and let the radical left, who is still rabid and ready to take over, take the reins. So I would hope, if a lot of Americans feel like I do, where they were completely jarred by the events of September 10th, and they know in their heart of hearts that what we stand for is truth. We want everyone to be treated equally. We appreciate legal immigration. We believe in capitalism and making this country as prosperous as possible. We want to make homes affordable for the younger generations. If we can pursue these policies and these conversations and get out in our communities as well and spread these ideals, there's nowhere to go but up, regardless of who's at the head of the Republican Party nationally. We have to also have leaders in our communities as well. And everyone can be a leader. Every single one of us can. And it's on us to do so. So it's your responsibility. Whoever's listening, you determine where we go next. And you can either sit back and watch it happen. But I will tell you this, and I say this often, if you do not get involved, you are at the mercy of those who do. So choose wisely.
Thank you very much. Would you do us a favor and tell our guests where to find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a TikTok account. Logic and Liberty is my main account. You can find me on X under Logic Lives. And then my podcast is Liberty Legion. We are on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube as well. And those are all the platforms you can find me on.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you once again for listening to Restitch America. As always, go to our social media, especially go to willfulpositivity.com and sign up to receive updates. And then also, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do so and share it with your friends and family. This is the place where we can have these kinds of conversations. We want to continue in Charlie Kirk's footsteps and create a bigger platform of people who are speaking civilly and expanding the cause of liberty and freedom in America. And for all of you who have subscribed, thank you so much for your support. This is the beginning of the movement that continues to transform America towards greatness. That's what we need to do, and we need to support each other. It doesn't take a lot to go and follow Logic and Liberty, and it doesn't take a lot to join the conversation. Don't be apathetic. Don't stand aloof and think that your country will be preserved by somebody else. This is all our responsibility. And as an immigrant, I have an even greater desire to preserve the liberty here, because I do not want this country to turn into the places that many of us left and sacrificed so much to get here. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next week.
Thank you for having me.